Dr. Rena Blackwood adjusted the delicate neural interface circuitry with steady hands, her dark eyes focused intently on the gossamer-thin connections. The laboratory aboard the International Science Station Prometheus hummed with quiet energy as she worked, the soft blue glow of quantum processors casting shadows across her features. "The human concept of precision is fascinating," came a melodic voice from behind her. "You rely so heavily on physical manipulation rather than thought-guided assembly." Rena smiled without looking up from her work. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, Zirith. Not everything needs to be done with psychic engineering." Her research partner, Zirith, moved closer to observe. The Viridian researcher's iridescent scales shifted colors slightly as she tilted her head, a sign of intellectual curiosity in her species. Like all Viridians, she possessed an elegant, almost serpentine grace, though her form was humanoid enough to use standard laboratory equipment. "The neural patterns you've mapped," Zirith said, her multifaceted eyes studying the holographic displays, "they're unlike anything in our databases. Human brains operate on principles that seem chaotic to us." "Chaos isn't always a bad thing," Rena replied, making a final adjustment before setting down her tools. "Sometimes the most interesting discoveries come from unexpected patterns." She straightened up, rolling her shoulders to work out the stiffness from hours of detailed work. "The interface is ready for initial testing." The Neural Link project had been 6 months in development, a joint venture between Earth's Neural Sciences Division and the Viridian Institute of Consciousness Studies. Its goal was ambitious: to create a bridge between the structured, highly ordered thought patterns of the Viridians and the more fluid, emotionally driven neural architecture of humans. "Are you certain you wish to be the human subject?" Zirith asked, her scales flickering with concern. "The risks are acceptable," Rena finished. "I designed the interface. I trust my work." She didn't add that she had volunteered because she couldn't ask anyone else to take the risk. As project lead, the responsibility was hers. Zirith moved to the control station, her long fingers dancing over the crystalline interface. "Beginning initialization sequence. Neural dampers are active. Safety protocols engaged." Her voice took on the precise, measured tones all Viridians used during scientific procedures. Rena sat in the neural interface chair, trying to ignore the flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. This moment could change everything, or end her career in spectacular failure. The interface sensors descended from above, their tip glowing with soft biophotonic light. "Establishing baseline neural pattern," Zirith announced. "Your thoughts are very active, Dr. Blackwood. Call me Rena, please. If we're going to try linking our minds, we should be on a first-name basis." A flicker of amusement crossed Zirith's features, subtle, but there. The Viridians weren't emotionless, as some humans believed, just contained. Measured. Their society valued order and control above all else. "Very well. Rena. Initiating primary neural contact in 3, 2, 1. The sensation began as a gentle pressure, like fingers softly pressing against her temples. Then came the strange double vision as her mind tried to process 2 sets of sensory inputs simultaneously. She could see herself through Zirith's eyes, a small, dark-haired human with features that seemed fascinatingly asymmetrical to Viridian aesthetics. "Neural bridge stable," Zirith reported, her voice echoing oddly in Rena's perception. "Beginning calibration sequence." That's when it happened. A stray thought, a random neural firing, crossed the bridge between their minds. Rena had been thinking about her cat back on Earth, the way it used to tickle her nose with its whiskers when seeking attention in the morning. The concept of tickling, that strange intersection of pleasure and discomfort, a voluntary and involuntary response, hit Zirith's ordered mind like a stone creating ripples in a still pond. Her scales flashed in rapid patterns as her body processed this entirely new type of sensation. And then, to both their shock, Zirith laughed. It wasn't a human laugh, exactly. It was more like a musical trill, but it carried the same spontaneous, uncontrolled quality that defined human laughter. For a Viridian, it was practically shocking. The neural monitors erupted in a cascade of readings as Ziritha's normally precise neural patterns shifted and reorganized, adapting to accommodate this new form of experience. Through their link, Rena felt the transformation, the wonderful, terrifying moment when Ziritha's mind glimpsed something beyond its usual ordered existence. Fascinating, Zirith managed, her scales still flickering with residual emotion. Is this how humans feel things? So immediate, so raw. That's just the beginning, Rena replied, her excitement building as she realized what they had accidentally discovered. Emotions aren't flaws in the system, Zirith. They're a whole other way of processing reality. The implications were staggering. If they could bridge not just thoughts but feelings between their species, it could revolutionize interstellar relations. Understanding each other wouldn't just be about exchanging information, it would be about sharing experiences, truly comprehending each other's perspectives. But as Rena looked at her friend and research partner, she saw something that excited her even more than the scientific implications. There was a new light in Ziritha's multifaceted eyes, a spark of something that looked very much like wonder. The Neuralink experiment had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, but not in the way they had planned. Instead of creating a bridge between two ways of thinking, they had opened a door to something entirely new, a way of being that combined the best of both species. And this was only the beginning. 3 days after the initial neural link experiment, Rena found Zirith in the station's observation dome, staring at the stars. The Viridian researchers' scales were shifting through subtle patterns of blue and silver, a display Rena had never seen before. Couldn't sleep? Rena asked, moving to stand beside her friend. The massive viewing window offered a spectacular view of the nearby nebula, its swirling colors reflecting off Ziritha's iridescent skin. Sleep has become different, Zirith replied, her voice carrying an unfamiliar undertone. I keep experiencing what you humans call dreams. Random neural patterns that create vivid sensory experiences. It's most disconcerting. Rena frowned, pulling out her diagnostic tablet. Are you still feeling effects from the link? It should have dissipated completely by now. The connection has faded, yes. But it seems to have left something behind. Zirith turned to face Rena, her multifaceted eyes reflecting starlight. My neural architecture is changing. Adapting. I find myself experiencing sensations, emotions, in ways that no Viridian should. The implications hit Rena like a physical force. The link created permanent pathways in your brain. That shouldn't be possible. We designed it specifically to prevent any lasting changes. Perhaps, Zirith said, her scales rippling with what Rena was starting to recognize as amusement, you underestimated the power of laughter. The research data supported Ziritha's observation. Over the next few hours, as they ran tests in the lab, they discovered that the brief moment of shared mirth had created a cascade effect in Ziritha's neural structure. Her typically rigid thought patterns were becoming more fluid, more adaptable. She was developing the capacity for emotional responses that her species had engineered out of themselves centuries ago. The Council will not be pleased, Zirith noted as they reviewed the results. They consider our emotional control to be the cornerstone of our civilization. To them, this would be seen as corruption. Rena looked up sharply from the neural scans. They wouldn't try to reverse it, would they? They might attempt to. Ziritha's scales shifted to deeper hues. But I find myself unwilling to return to my previous state. These new experiences, these feelings, they're overwhelming at times, but they're also. She paused, searching for the right words. They make me feel more complete. As if to demonstrate her point, Zirith reached out and touched the back of Rena's hand. The gesture was shocking, Viridians rarely initiated physical contact. But what happened next was even more surprising. Through some remnant of their neural link, Rena felt a ghost of Ziritha's emotions, wonder, excitement, and a touch of fear, all wrapped in a deep affection that transcended species barriers. "The link," Rena gasped. "It's still there." Faintly, Zirith confirmed. "It seems to activate with physical contact." Another unexpected development. They spent the next few hours documenting this phenomenon, but Rena found herself increasingly distracted by what it meant on a personal level. The bond between them was evolving into something unprecedented, not just a scientific breakthrough, but a genuine connection between two beings from vastly different worlds. "We need to report this," Rena finally said, though her tone suggested she wished they didn't have to. "The implications for interspecies relations alone." She was interrupted by the lab's communication system. "Dr. Blackwood, your presence is requested in the director's office immediately." The artificial voice carried an undertone of urgency that made both researchers exchange worried glances. "They know," Zirith said simply, her scales darkening with concern. "How could they? We haven't filed our reports yet. The council has ways of monitoring neural patterns across the station. They would have detected the anomalies in my brain activity." Ziritha's hand found Rena's again, the contact sending another wave of shared emotion between them. "Be careful. They will not understand what we've discovered here." Rena squeezed her friend's hand, trying to project reassurance through their subtle link. "What we've discovered might be more important than either of our governments realize. This isn't just about science anymore, is it?" "No," Zirith agreed, her scales shifting to a determined pattern. "It's about evolution. Growth. The potential for both our species to become something more than we are." As Rena made her way to the director's office, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the brink of something monumental. The neural link had opened a door, but what lay beyond it was both thrilling and terrifying in its implications. The real question was, would they be allowed to explore it? Or would fear of change, human and Viridian alike, slam that door shut before they could discover where it led? The answer, Rena suspected, would depend on what awaited her in the director's office. And on whether the fragile connection growing between her and Zirith could withstand the scrutiny and pressure it was about to face. Director Hawthorne's office felt unusually cold as Rena entered. The stark space station architecture was softened only by the holographic display of Earth rotating slowly behind his desk. Two other figures were present, Ambassador Lin from the Earth Diplomatic Corps, and more worryingly, High Observer Vax of the Viridian Council. "Dar. Blackwood," Hawthorne began, his gray eyes hard as steel, "would you care to explain why your routine neural link experiment has triggered a Level 1 diplomatic incident?" Before Rena could respond, High Observer Vax stepped forward, his scales a rigid pattern of formal disapproval. "One of our most promising researchers is showing signs of severe neural degradation. The ordered patterns that define our species are breaking down into chaos." "With respect," Rena countered, keeping her voice steady, "what you're calling degradation might actually be evolution. The changes in Ziritha's neural structure are opening up new possibilities for corruption," Vax interrupted. "For the dissolution of everything our society has worked to achieve. We eliminated the tyranny of emotion for a reason, Dr. Blackwood." Ambassador Lin, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "Perhaps we should consider the potential benefits. If we could better understand each other's thought processes." "Understanding is not the issue," Vax said. "Contamination is. We're removing research specialist Zirith from the project immediately. Our medical teams will begin neural restoration procedures within the hour." Rena felt her heart skip a beat. "You can't do that. She's a sentient being who's made her own choice to." "She is compromised," Vax stated flatly. "Her judgment is impaired by these new emotional responses. We are acting in her best interest." Through the remnants of their link, Rena suddenly felt a surge of distress. Somewhere in the station, Zirith was in trouble. The emotion was so strong it made her stumble slightly, catching herself on the edge of Hawthorne's desk. "Dr. Blackwood?" Ambassador Lin moved to steady her. Are you all right? Rena straightened, making a quick decision. I apologize, but I'm not feeling well. May I be excused? Hawthorne frowned. We're not finished here. Medical emergency in Laboratory 7, the station's AI announced suddenly. Unauthorized access detected. Security teams responding. Rena was moving before anyone could stop her. She heard shouts behind her but didn't slow down. Through their connection, she could feel Ziritha's determination mixed with fear. Her friend was fighting back against something, and Rena knew exactly where to find her. The scene in Lab 7 was chaos. 2 Viridian security officers lay unconscious near the entrance, their scales dulled with neural suppressant gas. Zirith stood at the neural interface station, her fingers flying over the controls while more security forces tried to breach the sealed inner doors. Rena. Ziritha's scales flashed with relief. The neural restoration team, they tried to take me by force. I couldn't let them erase what I've become. They won't, Rena promised, rushing to help secure the laboratory. But what's your plan? We can't hold them off forever. Ziritha's multifaceted eyes gleamed with an almost human determination. The neural interface. I've modified it. If we can establish a full link, prove that this connection between us is something valuable, something worth preserving. It's dangerous, Rena said, even as she moved toward the interface chair. We barely understood the effects of the partial link. A full connection could kill us. Ziritha's scales rippled with what Rena now recognized as grim humor. Perhaps. But returning to what I was before, that would be its own kind of death. The pounding on the laboratory doors grew louder. They could hear Director Hawthorne's voice demanding they stand down, mixed with High Observer Vax's threats of severe consequences. Rena looked at her friend, this being from another world who had somehow become so much more than a research partner. Through their faint link, she could feel Ziritha's absolute conviction that this was right, this was necessary. Not just for them, but for both their species. Together then? Rena asked, settling into the interface chair as Zirith did the same with the paired unit. Together, Zirith confirmed, her scales shifting through patterns of affection and trust that needed no translation. As the neural interface hummed to life around them, as the barriers between their minds began to dissolve, Rena had a moment of perfect clarity. This wasn't just about proving a scientific point. It was about showing both their peoples that there was another way, that progress didn't have to mean losing what made them unique, but could instead mean becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. The last thing she heard before the full link engaged was the laboratory doors beginning to give way. But by then, it didn't matter. Whatever happened next would happen to both of them, their minds and experiences merging into something entirely new, something neither human nor Viridian had ever dreamed possible. The transformation had begun. The moment the full neural link engaged, reality itself seemed to shift. Rena's consciousness expanded, merging with Ziritha's in a kaleidoscope of sensation and thought. Human intuition met Viridian logic, creating patterns of understanding that neither species had experienced before. Through Ziritha's eyes, Rena saw colors she had never known existed. Through Rena's emotional centers, Zirith experienced the pure joy of unfettered feeling. Their memories flowed together, childhood on Earth blending with early training in the Viridian education pods, first kisses mixing with first successful thought patterns, hopes and fears and dreams all swirling together into something entirely new. The security forces burst into the lab to find both researchers suspended in a state of neural communion, their bodies surrounded by a soft bioluminescent glow. The neural interface had evolved beyond its original programming, adapting to facilitate their unprecedented connection. Shut it down. High Observer Vax commanded, his scales rigid with alarm. Sever the connection immediately. Director Hawthorne moved forward, but Ambassador Lin caught his arm. Wait, she said, pointing to the neural monitoring displays. Look at these patterns. This isn't degradation, it's synthesis. The holographic readouts showed something remarkable. Rather than one mind overwhelming the other, or both descending into chaos, their neural patterns were harmonizing. Human creativity was enhancing Viridian logic. Viridian precision was strengthening human focus. They were becoming more than either species alone, yet somehow remaining uniquely themselves. Inside the neural link, Rena and Zirith had discovered something profound. They could see the fundamental interconnectedness of all things, the ways in which emotion and logic, chaos and order, weren't opposites but complementary forces. Through their joined consciousness, they began to understand how their species could work together, not by changing who they were, but by sharing what made them unique. "We have to stop this," Vax insisted. "The contamination." "Is nothing of the sort," a new voice interrupted. Dar. Essia, the station's chief xenobiologist, entered the lab with her own set of scans. "What we're witnessing is controlled neural evolution. Their brains aren't being damaged, they're developing new capabilities. Capabilities that could revolutionize interspecies relations." The security teams watched in amazement as Rena and Zirith began to move in perfect synchronization, their neural link manifesting in physical harmony. When they spoke, their voices merged in an eerie chorus that combined human warmth with Viridian precision. "We understand now," they said together. "What we feared was not corruption, but growth. What we resisted was not chaos, but change." Through their linked minds, they began to share visions of possibility. They showed the assembled officials glimpses of what they could see, a future where humans and Viridians worked together, each bringing their unique strengths to solve problems neither could handle alone. They demonstrated how emotion could enhance logic, how order could support creativity rather than suppress it. Ambassador Lin stepped forward, her diplomatic training allowing her to grasp the implications quickly. "This could change everything. Not just human-Viridian relations, but our understanding of consciousness itself." Even High Observer Vax's rigid stance began to soften as he witnessed the beauty of their merged consciousness. The patterns of their joined minds displayed on the lab's holographic monitors showed something his species had long thought impossible: perfect harmony between logic and emotion. "Perhaps," he admitted reluctantly, "we have been too quick to judge. Too rigid in our definitions of progress." Director Hawthorne ordered the security teams to stand down. Dr. Essia began documenting the unprecedented neural patterns, her excitement barely contained. But for Rena and Zirith, these external events were secondary to what they were experiencing together. Through their connection, they were discovering that consciousness itself was more flexible, more adaptable than either species had imagined. They were pioneers on the frontier of a new kind of existence, one that celebrated diversity rather than feared it, that sought to combine different ways of being rather than force everyone into the same mold. As the link began to naturally fade, returning them gently to their individual selves, both Rena and Zirith knew that nothing could ever be the same. They had glimpsed something profound, something that would change both their species forever. The barrier between them hadn't just been broken, it had been transformed into a bridge. And across that bridge, countless others would follow, each discovering their own way to combine the best of both worlds. 6 months after the breakthrough in Laboratory 7, the International Science Station Prometheus had transformed into something unprecedented in human or Viridian history. The once sterile corridors now hosted small gardens where human plants grew alongside Viridian crystal formations, a physical manifestation of the changes taking root in both societies. Rena stood at her usual spot in the observation dome, watching a Viridian ship dock alongside a human transport vessel. Her neural interface, now a sleek band around her temple, pulsed softly as Zirith approached. "Another group of volunteers for the Harmony program," Zirith said, her scales shimmering with pleased anticipation. 15 humans and 12 Viridians, all eager to explore the possibilities of shared consciousness. Through their permanent but controlled link, Rena felt her friend's satisfaction. The program they had inadvertently pioneered had grown beyond anything they could have imagined. The modified neural interfaces, carefully calibrated to allow for safe, limited periods of shared consciousness, were revolutionizing diplomacy, science, and cultural exchange. The Council's latest report is encouraging, Rena noted, sharing the data through their link. Cases of successful integration are up 80%. Even the conservative factions are starting to accept that this isn't contamination, it's natural progression. Evolution, Zirith agreed, her scales flickering with amusement. Though I doubt my ancestors ever imagined evolution would come through laughter. The memory of that first shared laugh still brought joy to both of them. What had started as a simple ticklish sensation had grown into something that was reshaping two civilizations. The Viridians were learning to integrate emotion into their logical frameworks, while humans were discovering new depths of focus and clarity through Viridian mental disciplines. Ambassador Lin appeared at the dome's entrance, accompanied by a Viridian dignitary whose scales bore the complex patterns of high office. Dr. Blackwood, research specialist Zirith, she called. The Unity Council is ready for your presentation. The Unity Council, a joint human-Viridian governing body that had emerged in response to the Harmony program, represented everything they had fought for. It was a place where both species could work together, each bringing their unique perspectives to solve shared challenges. As they made their way to the council chamber, Rena and Zirith passed several bonded pairs, human and Viridian partners who had chosen to maintain ongoing neural links. Each pair had found their own balance, their own way of combining their species' strengths while maintaining their individual identities. Remember when they wanted to cure me? Zirith mused, her scales rippling with what Rena now recognized as ironic humor. Now they're studying our link as a model for stable long-term neural bonding. The council chamber itself reflected the changes sweeping through both societies. The traditional rigid seating had been replaced with adaptive furniture that accommodated both human and Viridian physiology. The lighting shifted subtly between spectrums comfortable for both species. Even the air was carefully balanced to support both forms of respiration. As they took their places at the presentation podium, Rena felt a surge of emotion from Zirith, pride, excitement, and a deep contentment that needed no translation. Through their link, they seamlessly shared control of the holographic displays, demonstrating the latest developments in neural harmony technology. The applications extend far beyond simple communication, they explained, their voices naturally synchronizing. We're seeing unprecedented breakthroughs in joint research projects. Problems that stumped either species alone are being solved by harmonized teams. The crystal organic computer cores, the new faster-than-light drive theories, the advances in consciousness mapping, all products of true cooperation. High Observer Vax, now a strong supporter of the program, leaned forward with interest. And the concerns about loss of identity? About cultural dissolution? Have proven unfounded, Rena replied confidently. If anything, the neural links have strengthened cultural appreciation on both sides. We're not becoming a single homogeneous species, we're learning to celebrate and utilize our differences. The future, Zirith added, her scales dancing with possibilities, lies not in either pure logic or pure emotion, but in finding the harmony between them. In understanding that different ways of experiencing the universe aren't threats to be feared, but gifts to be shared. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic approval from both human and Viridian council members, Rena and Zirith shared a moment of quiet joy through their link. They had created something extraordinary, not just a bridge between two species, but a whole new way of being that celebrated diversity rather than feared it. Outside the council chamber's viewport, Earth and Viridia Prime were both visible as distant points of light. Between them, the space station spun slowly, a shining example of what was possible when different worlds came together. Not to change each other, but to grow together into something greater than either could be alone. Ready for the next adventure? Zirith asked through their link, her scales shimmering with anticipation. Rena smiled, sending back waves of affection and excitement. Always. As long as we face it together. Their discovery had started with an unexpected laugh, but it had grown into something that would echo through generations of both species. They had proven that the greatest achievements don't come from conquering differences, but from embracing them. And in doing so, they had opened the door to a future filled with endless possibilities for growth, understanding, and shared discovery.